Something is brewing in Dallas, and not the kind of quiet, wait-and-see brew that Cowboys fans have grown painfully accustomed to watching fall apart by October. This is different. The phones are moving. The names are leaking. The insiders are talking. And right now, the Dallas Cowboys are the most discussed franchise in all of football. Not because of a blockbuster free agency splash or a quarterback controversy, but because of what is shaping up to be one of the most consequential draft decisions this organization has made in years. The Cowboys are on the verge of doing something they have not done since 2012. They're thinking about trading up. And if they pull it off the way the rumor mill is starting to suggest, Cowboys Nation might be watching one of the great draft hauls in the history of this franchise unfold on a single Thursday night in Pittsburgh. Welcome back to Cowboys Reality Check, the channel where we strip away the noise, dig into the actual intelligence coming out of league circles, and tell you what it means for your Dallas Cowboys. Today we are knee-deep in legitimate draft intel. And if you follow this team at all, you're going to want to hear every word of this. Let's start with the headline that is already making waves across every major draft platform. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler went on air and then followed up with a tweet that clarified something the NFL world has been wondering about for weeks. Teams are starting to work the phones for trades up and down the board. And according to Fowler, belief in league circles is that Arizona at pick 3 and Tennessee at pick 4 are both open to moving back. But the team everyone is watching most closely is the Dallas Cowboys. Why? Because their defensive needs are not a secret. They are obvious, they are urgent, and they are not being missed by any front office paying attention. Fowler noted that Dallas is not overly active on the phones yet, but that word yet is doing a lot of work in that sentence. You do not describe a team as not overly active unless they have made some calls. You do not frame a franchise as open-minded about a potential move, but also comfortable staying put unless they are actively weighing the decision. That is not radio silence. That is a front office with one eye on the board and one hand near the phone, waiting for the moment the calculus tips in their favor. Here is the part that truly matters and that deserves more analysis than it has received. The Cowboys hold picks 12 and 20 in the first round of the 2026 NFL Draft. That is an extraordinary position of leverage. 2 first-round selections, both premium enough to be compelling trade assets, and both late enough in the round that moving up is actually financially feasible if the right deal presents itself. The question is not whether Dallas has the currency to move. They clearly do. The question is whether they believe the player at the top of their board is worth the price of admission to get into the top 10. And based on everything coming out of league circles right now, that player has a name. Before we get to him, let's give full context to what ESPN's Matt Miller wrote in a collaborative notebook with Field Yates and Fowler, because this piece is essential reading for understanding where the Cowboys sit in the draft landscape. Miller projected as many as 8 trades in the first round alone, a staggering number that reflects just how flat and bottom-heavy this draft class really is. The logic is counterintuitive, but sound. When there are fewer transcendent prospects, teams near the top of the board lose leverage because the drop-off from pick 3 to pick 10 is not as dramatic as in a loaded class. That creates a buyer's market for teams willing to move up because the sellers know that if they fall back too far, they might not land the player they want either. Miller specifically named the Cowboys at 12 and the New York Jets at 16 as the 2 franchises most likely to make aggressive moves upward, pointing out that teams picking in the teens would desperately like to get ahead of their competition to secure higher-rated defenders before they are off the board. Now here is where it gets really interesting and where the actual target comes into focus. Field Yates offered a critical piece of analysis in that same ESPN notebook. He noted that the New York Giants at pick 5 represent the first logical landing spot for Ohio State safety Caleb Downs, which, if it happened, would make Downs the first safety taken in the top 10 since Jamal Adams went to the Jets back in 2017. That is 9 years of the position being passed over at that range. But here is Yates's floor for Downs, and it should mean everything to Cowboys fans. It is hard to envision Caleb Downs getting past Dallas at number 12. The only realistic scenario where he is still on the board at 12 is if an early run on defenders removes prospects like David Bailey, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, or Mansour Delane first. That is a lot of things that have to break right for Dallas to get downs without moving. The more the board shakes out with defenders going early, the more pressure builds on the Cowboys to either act fast or accept that their top-ranked prospect is gone. And that is the core tension driving everything right now. Dallas has apparently identified Caleb Downs as their number one target. Every major insider who has touched this story has arrived at the same conclusion. Todd McShay, Mel Kiper Jr., and Dane Brugler at The Athletic all have Downs penciled into Dallas's slot in their most prominent mock drafts, with the Cowboys moving up to the Cleveland Browns pick 6 to secure him. When that many respected evaluators with real league sources arrive at the same destination independently, you stop calling it coincidence and start calling it reporting. The Cowboys want Caleb Downs. Whether they get him at 12 or have to pay the price to jump up and guarantee it, that appears to be the mission. And why would you not want this player? Downs is not just a good prospect. He is the most complete, most NFL-ready defender in this entire draft class. He recorded an 83.7 PFF grade over more than 500 snaps at Ohio State, a program that does not allow average players to earn that kind of grade. He pulled 2 interceptions in 2025, showing real instincts in coverage. He played multiple positions across the secondary for Ryan Day's defense, which means he arrives at the next level already schooled in complexity, already capable of lining up at multiple spots, already wired to process the game at an elite level. For a Cowboys defense that is being rebuilt from scratch under new defensive coordinator Christian Parker, adding a player who can anchor the back end, communicate coverage assignments, and make game-changing plays in the open field is not a luxury. It is a necessity. The Cowboys have already addressed the safety room in free agency this offseason by bringing in Jalen Thompson and P.J. Locke. Those are both solid additions. But Caleb Downs at pick 6 or even at pick 12 would elevate that room from functional to genuinely dangerous. You would be building a secondary around a first-round safety with range, football IQ, and the kind of instincts that translate immediately at the next level. That is the kind of infrastructure you build a defense on for the next decade. Now, if Dallas does pull the trigger on a trade up to the Browns at pick 6, the likely structure of that deal becomes fairly clear. The Cowboys would send both first-round picks, 12 and 20, to Cleveland in exchange for pick 6 and a compensatory pick that drops back into the second round, likely around the 39th overall selection. For the Browns, this is an excellent return. They're not competing for a playoff spot in 2026. They need volume picks to reload young talent across their roster, and 2 first-round selections is a haul that accelerates a genuine rebuild. For Dallas, it is an aggressive but calculated swing that concentrates their draft capital on 1 elite defender and 1 pick in the second round, trusting that the quality of those 2 players outweighs the quantity of picks they gave up. It is the kind of move you make when you believe your window is cracking open and you cannot afford to let your top target walk out of it. And that brings us to the second half of this equation. The pick that lands at 39 if that trade goes through, because there's a name gaining very real momentum in Cowboy circles that deserves serious attention. That name is Jacob Rodriguez, the senior linebacker out of Texas Tech. And his connection to Dallas is already documented. Cowboys Nation, here is where this story takes a turn that most national coverage has not fully absorbed. At the Jason Witten College Man of the Year ceremony held at the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco, the Cowboys' own headquarters, Jacob Rodriguez was in attendance and spoke glowingly about new defensive coordinator Christian Parker, the Cowboys organization, and their coaching staff. That is not a coincidence of geography. That is a player who has visited this facility, broken bread with his coaching staff, and walked away clearly impressed by what he saw. Clarence Hill Jr. of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, one of the most connected beat writers in Dallas, was the one who reported this, and that kind of sourcing carries real weight. The Cowboys met with Rodriguez at the NFL Combine. They attended his pro day at Texas Tech in Lubbock. They had dinner with him. When you combine all of those touch points, you are not looking at a team doing routine due diligence on a day 3 prospect. You're looking at a front office that has done its homework thoroughly and likes what it found. So who exactly is Jacob Rodriguez? And why is the level of institutional investment from Dallas making more and more sense the closer you look at his profile? Rodriguez's story is one of the most compelling in this entire draft class. He arrived at Virginia in 2021 as a three-star quarterback recruit, played multiple positions on offense for the Cavaliers: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And then, after head coach Bronco Mendenhall resigned, hit the transfer portal and followed his brother to Texas Tech. He arrived in Lubbock essentially as a walk-on, sleeping on a spare bit of apartment floor before earning a scholarship that fall, and then made a complete positional transition to linebacker under head coach Joey McGuire. That kind of adaptability, switching not just teams but entire sides of the ball, tells you something foundational about the way this player thinks and processes the game. His 2023 season was derailed by a Lisfranc sprain and bone bruise in his foot that limited him to 5 games. That injury concern is real, and NFL teams will have it flagged. But what followed is one of the most decorated 2-year runs by a collegiate linebacker in recent memory. In 2024, Rodriguez started all 13 games, led the Big 12 in tackles with 127, and also led Texas Tech in tackle for loss, sacks, and forced fumbles. In 2025, he did it again on an even bigger stage, helping lead the Red Raiders to their first Big 12 championship in program history and their first college football playoff appearance in the history of the school. His final stat line for 2025 reads like something you would assign to a video game slider set to all Madden. 117 tackles, 7 forced fumbles to lead the entire country, for interceptions, 6 passes defended, 11 tackles for loss, and a sack. He won the Butkus Award as the nation's top linebacker. He won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy as the nation's top defensive player. He won the Lombardi Award. He was a consensus All-American and the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. In the history of collegiate football, you will be searching for a long time to find a defensive season that checks more boxes simultaneously. The underlying analytics are equally staggering. According to PFF, Rodriguez finished first among all college linebackers in overall grade, first in run defense grade, and first in coverage grade. His run defense grade came in at 94.8, a number that is not just good for a Big 12 linebacker. It is elite by any standard at any level of college football. His overall grade topped 93, and his coverage grade sat at 92.7. He was not producing in a soft conference against overmatched opponents. Texas Tech played real competition in an improved Big 12, and Rodriguez made the opposition look outmatched regardless. The tape and the analytical grades are telling the same story, and that alignment is rare at this position. Why is Rodriguez projected by most outlets as a day 2 or even day 3 pick? It comes down to the tangibles that scouts obsess over when evaluating linebackers for the NFL level. He stands at 6'1" and weighs in around 231 to 238 pounds depending on the source, which is undersized for a traditional inside linebacker in a physicality-driven scheme. His arm length, recorded at 30 7/8 inches at the combine, ranks in roughly the 11th percentile for linebackers, which creates real concerns about his ability to shed blocks from NFL guards who will be significantly bigger and stronger than anything he faced in Lubbock. When offensive linemen get their hands on him in close quarters, the limited extension and below-average anchor strength can lead to him getting stuck on blocks rather than shedding and making plays. His 40 time has also raised flags about whether he has the sideline-to-sideline range to survive in a Tampa 2 scheme that asks linebackers to cover deep zones. His missed tackle rate in 2025 came in at 13.9% according to PFF, which is not catastrophic, but is a number NFL teams will scrutinize. These are legitimate concerns. They are not fabricated. And they're the reason Rodriguez is likely to be sitting there at pick 39 rather than going in the middle of the first round where his production arguably deserves to place him. But here is the analytical case that is being underweight across the national conversation. The NFL has spent the last decade moving away from the old-school thumper linebacker who wins the battle in the trenches and toward a speed and instinct model that asks linebackers to diagnose quickly, flow to the ball in space, and make plays in coverage rather than stack and shed on every down. A 4-2-5 or single high structure Exactly the kind of framework a modern coordinator like Christian Parker figures to deploy is precisely the environment where Rodriguez's game-reading ability and short-area quickness thrive. His background as an offensive quarterback gives him a perspective on coverage structures that most offensive players simply do not have. He sees route distributions the way a signal caller reads a defense. He processes pre-snap information at a level that compensates meaningfully for the athletic limitations that concern evaluators. The comparison that keeps appearing in Rodriguez's scouting reports is Fred Warner, the San Francisco 49ers linebacker who has spent years defying the measurables first evaluation model and becoming one of the best players at the position in the NFL. Warner is not the biggest linebacker. He is not the most explosive athlete, but his football intelligence, his instincts in coverage, and his ability to produce havoc on every snap made him a cornerstone of one of the NFL's premier defenses for most of the past decade. If Rodriguez can even approximate that trajectory in the right system, and the Cowboys' evolving defensive scheme under Parker looks like a strong fit, then getting him at pick 39 is not just a solid value play. It would be one of the steals of the entire 2026 draft class. The scenario the Cowboys appear to be weighing now is the combination trade that would reshape their entire defensive trajectory in one afternoon. You move from 12 and 20 up to the Browns' pick 6 and acquire pick 39 in the exchange. You take Caleb Downs at 6, giving Dallas the elite safety and defensive conductor the roster has been missing since the secondary began deteriorating. Then you turn around with pick 39 and take Jacob Rodriguez, giving the Cowboys a high-production, high-character linebacker who won every individual defensive award college football offers and who has already built a relationship with the very coaching staff he would be joining. 2 players, 2 premium additions, 1 decisive afternoon of football at the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh. Now, there are legitimate reasons to pump the brakes on the trade-up scenario, and intellectual honesty demands they be acknowledged. The Cowboys have not traded up in the first round of the NFL Draft since 2012. That is not a minor footnote. It is a 14-year pattern of organizational restraint that reflects a deeply ingrained philosophy about not overpaying to jump the board. The concern about positional value also has merit. Trading 2 first-round picks to move into the top 10 for a safety, even a safety as exceptional as Caleb Downs, would be unusual for any front office, and particularly unusual for one that has historically avoided that kind of aggression. There's also the price question. Moving from 12 to 6 is not a cheap transaction. The Cowboys would almost certainly be surrendering both first-round picks, which means they are concentrating their entire day one investment on a single selection. If Downs is still on the board at 12, the case for that trade becomes significantly harder to justify. But consider the counterargument, and consider it seriously. This is not a normal draft. As Matt Miller pointed out, the flat nature of this class means positional value norms are already being thrown out. Teams are expected to reach, expected to overpay, expected to break from their usual frameworks because the supply of elite talent is so compressed at the top. In a draft with so few blue-chip prospects, getting the one that fits your specific need and your specific scheme is worth more than it would be in a loaded class where you can find comparable talent at pick 15 or 18. For the Cowboys, Caleb Downs is not just a good prospect. He is the prospect. And if Dallas comes out of Pittsburgh with Downs and Rodriguez, nobody who follows this franchise is going to spend much time mourning pick 20. Ian Rappaport reported on NFL Network that the Cowboys are the most likely team in the entire league to trade up from their current spots in the first round. When the most plugged-in reporter in football makes that designation publicly, it carries weight that goes beyond projection. That is not a guess. That is sourcing. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys front office know the clock is ticking on building something real around the young core they have assembled. The defense needs not just additions, but a foundational identity, and the 2026 draft is the moment to establish it. The Cowboys have the leverage. They have identified their targets. They have done the homework on both players at a level of detail that goes well beyond standard pre-draft evaluation. Now it comes down to whether Jerry Jones. So here's the question this draft comes down to for Cowboys fans. Would you rather have two picks in the back half of the first round and hope the board falls the right way? Or would you rather have Caleb Downs at 6 and Jacob Rodriguez at 39 and know exactly what you are walking out of Pittsburgh with? Cowboys Reality Check will be here every step of the way as we count down to draft night in Pittsburgh.